we had a newborn at the time, and so Parker always wanted to be carried, and we thought, oh, he's just jealous of the newborn, but it was literally because he couldn't walk the distances. And kids, as you realize, can really kind of mask this. He would spend a lot of time just playing on a coffee table with toy soldiers and just wouldn't be moving around. And as we were talking about this last night, a mother always knows, and Shari is the one who really, just drove this to try and get an answer, because, it was seeing doctors, they said growing pains, the usual kind of long diagnosis. And then finally we got to a rheumatoid pediatrician in San Diego, and he kind of figured it out. And it was interesting because he said, at first he thought it was rheumatoid arthritis, and then we explained how he would go to like Legoland or to a playground, and he would just want to sit and not move around. And the rheumatoid doctor said, well, usually once somebody with arthritis starts moving around, they actually feel better and they can keep moving. So he was the one who kind of thought it might be JDM, and we did the biopsy, and so it's a long time ago.
It seems like yesterday. Yeah, I think also as we were going through it, we finally couldn't get that diagnosis, so we just eventually went to the ER. I think some people do that too. It's just he couldn't move, and so we just carried him in to the ER and said, help us, he can't move. And it's surprising because, as Tom said, they masked their symptoms so well that we didn't even know he couldn't lift his head off the, off the pillow. So they laid him down and they said, try to lift your head, and he couldn't even lift it. So he was basically paralyzed. It was tough, as we all know. And but he was a trooper, and so after we watched him for a year be so courageous and fight his disease with such perseverance and strength, we knew that we needed to do something, and we realized that there really wasn't an organization that was devoted to this disease, and there wasn't a lot of research, or not enough research, and Facebook wasn't around yet. It was really hard to connect with anyone, and I remember finding one support group that I posted a message looking for anyone that might have some connection to dermatomyositis, and one person responded, and she happened to live, it was a grandmother that lived somewhere close by to us in San Diego, and it happened to be a grandmother of a child with JM, and we connected, and we ended up deciding to start this organization. We knew that something was needed to support families and defend research, and that was how Cure JM came about. We knew we needed to do something, and someone had to do it.
Really hard. The question was, how did we find other families? And it was really, really hard. We did get a little bit involved with the Myositis Association, but again, they, which is a great organization, but their JDM focus was very limited. They're more IBM and adult dermatomyositis, and so that's a good question. And really, until maybe some early doctors, we could connect with people. It's funny because the first year we were like everyone, we were just devastated, and then you jump to the internet and you see the worst of the worst, and again, that's why we decided we have to, start up something to get the connections. But to your question, really, until we, again, pre-Facebook, pre-social media, it was our chat area of our message board of our website that is really what kind of started it. And
Yeah, so it was slow growing at first, and it was getting the website up and And as you said, we had a really active message board at that time. This was before Facebook was around, and it was drawing patients. We set up a center of excellence in Chicago pretty quickly, I think within the first couple of years. And so we were getting patients from there, and then from Dr. Ryder, we set up, connected with her pretty quickly as well. So we were getting patients from there. But it was slow going. We were hand-folding brochures in the beginning once we got a brochure out there. And when someone would register as a patient, I had to type everything into the spreadsheet. And it was pretty work-intensive in the beginning.
But it was very grassroots, too, because even at the very beginning, we hosted a bunch of families at our house in Southern California, and that was great because that was that connection that everyone talks about, that the kids finally connect to each other.
You know, if you look at the statistics from the IRS, most new nonprofits fail. What was different about Cure JM? What special things exist in this organization that made it succeed at the level it has?
Yeah, I think it's the passion and compassion and drive and commitment. I mean, if you look at the people in the room and hear their stories, and everyone is so driven and really helps one another, and I'm just amazed at the people that are on our board and on our leadership committee and come to our conferences, and everyone wants to help. And even our doctors, we've just been really blessed by everyone that's come into contact with us.
Yeah, early on we had a saying called Shari and Harriet and some mother tigers, and they were really fighting for their cubs. And yeah. The other funny thing is when we first started, we naive to starting up a nonprofit. We knew we wanted funds for research, so we just that was going to be our goal. It was all going to be about research funding, and in a way, we really didn't want to create a family support organization. That was we didn't think that was the fastest path, but we both learned over time that actually is the fastest path, because it's that family support that brings in friends, families, community, donors, everything else. So it can't be without that support. And that was probably our biggest learning throughout this process.
I know the two of you, I'm quite sure, wake up every morning and one of the first things in your mind is Cure JM and what's next. What worries you most when you look at what you think our future path might be?
That's a really good question. I think, part of it's just every time I come to a conference, I'm more optimistic than the year before, and it's because I can see the new blood coming in and the new families, and yeah. And that's a really good question. I think there are challenges. There's definitely financial challenges. Research is not inexpensive. But I am very, very encouraged because I just see the snowball starting to roll down the hill and building up momentum. And we never would have thought a couple of things. We literally, our first fundraising was lemonade stands. And I think, I remember when we first got our first sizable check, from a donation who had heard about us through the internet and all that. We were so excited. It was, and it's just that momentum that's really what we need most.
Well, I think it's funny when you say sizable, because it keeps going up. Like the first time I remember the lemonade stand, someone walked up and gave us $100, and that made our day. And then then it keeps going up, and then you want 500, 1,000. It keeps going up. What sizable means, but I think to what our concern is now we just want to make those dollars more so that we can fund more and more research and get into clinical trials, and like we want to do with vamorolone. So it's getting those bigger dollars so that we can actually have those clinical trials, which I think that we can raise those dollars that we need to get there with people like this. So I think that we can do that. We knew that someone had to start it, and somebody had to do it, and we knew that we had the capabilities that we could do it. We thought that we could take it on. We didn't exactly know what we were getting into, and that was probably good. It was a lot of work, but I'm glad we did it. There was so much learning and every step along the way, and I'm still learning. But the experiences and the people I've met along the way have been incredible. I mean, the only thing that I wish didn't happen was having my son be sick. But every other piece of it has been amazing. But yeah, I mean, there was no other organization that solely served this group of kids, and it was just desperately needed. So we knew we had to do it. So how did it affect our family? Is that what you said? Yeah, it was. That's a really good question. I think my one regret, and what I recommend to all families, is to make sure that you include your siblings in everything that you do. I feel like, well, there's a couple of things. I feel like Cure JM was I have three boys, and I feel like Cure JM was my fourth child, that it was a big priority and still is a big priority in our lives, and that it did take away from my family because of all the work I put into it. I also feel that I put too much emphasis on my child that was sick, and that took away from his siblings, and they should have prioritized more time with the siblings, and they should have each had their separate time with mom or their separate time with dad. So I think it did take away from the family, and in hindsight, I would have done it a little differently. But it also, at the same time, it brought the family together because we had jogathons at Parker's school every year, and that brought us all together as a family. And the disease itself, as you probably all know, brings the family together as well. And I think we're actually a stronger, more cohesive family because of it. My kids are really mature kids. If you meet them, they're amazing, compassionate, smart people. And so there's good and bad about it.
Yeah, I think, and you'll probably all relate to this, there are times when you feel like, because, especially in the early days too, it's like, is my child just the experiment here? Because we're just trying to try these new drugs, or we're trying these new treatments, and you feel guilt from that, but of course the other consequence of not doing anything is so much worse. And then there's a little bit of, especially if you're doing fundraising and stuff, there's a little bit of, am I making my child the poster child for this? And we see even with our own son, he doesn't, his brothers are actually more involved in the organization than he wants to be. He does not want to be the sick kid. And so that's something that you just have to balance out.
Well, you said when he was younger, he was okay with it. Now he's 21, and he's not here at the conference, and his brothers are. But when he was younger, it was okay. So it kind of goes in phases. So I think things change over time. But his brothers are here, and they're wearing the bracelets, and they've always worn it. But yeah, for him, over time, things change, and I think it will again. I think in 5 years, I think he'll be here in a different way.
Yeah, judging from, because I facilitate the teen and young adult panel, which is a great panel if you've not been to it, because basically it's a chance for newly diagnosed people to ask, who might have only a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, to talk to a 15-year-old, or what's going to be their life, or what was it like going through it, and it's interesting because even on that panel, there are people that, again, they wanted to push away from it. They didn't want to be part of it. And now they're coming back. They want to come back to the conference. They want to give back. And help show the way for other kids.
Tom, Shari, let me just say that that last night I made some remarks to this group over dinner about living a purposeful life, and I had you guys in mind when I put that together. Thanks so much for what you've done.
Thank you.